I'd like to call to order the Appointments and Ordinance Committee meeting via WebEx conferencing system on Wednesday, August 11th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. This meeting is being recorded by the Appointments and Ordinance Committee. If any other persons are present are doing the same, please notify me at this time. Seeing none. Counselor Gwynn is here. Counselor Gilmore.
Here.
Counselor Jarvis.
Here.
Counselor Dolan is excused. Counselor Elmer.
Here.
Counselor Ricketts. President Ricketts.
Here.
We have a quorum. Also, speaking with us today via phone will be Counselor Forgy, representing the Charter Commission representative. Chris, are you able to hear us still?
Yes, I am. Everything's good.
Okay. And Chris is here. And also, David Singer was invited by myself to be here today as the chair of the Charter Review Board. And David will be speaking with us at some point today. Can I have someone make a motion to accept the minutes of July 27th?
So moved.
Motion made by Elmer and seconded by
Jarvis.
Jarvis, thank you. We have no public hearings this evening. We do have some motions coming up. Just remember tonight, there's no public comment. There's no public hearing. This is a working meeting of this committee. The only people that will be speaking are people that were invited by myself to help facilitate the change drafts and move this forward so we can get some of this on next week's full council agenda is my hope, but not necessarily. So that's tonight's thought. Motions and discussion items.
Councilor Gwynn?
Yes?
It's Councilor Forgy. I think you need to vote on your motion to accept the minutes.
Oh, yes, probably. Thank you. I'm talking too much tonight. All those in favor of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Any abstentions? Seeing none, I thank you for that. I love being told what to do, so it works out wonderfully. All right, we're in good shape. Okay, let's move on to motions. Would someone like to read the motion that's in our packet? Counselor Elmer, do you have that?
I don't have it in front of me. I'm looking for it.
It's the, if anyone can read this, this is the affirmations of the mayor's appointments.
All right, let me look it up for you all.
Where's it going to be?
I have it.
Vice President Gilmore, would you like to read that motion, please?
City Council moved that it be ordered that the Greenfield City Council, pursuant to Charter Section 2-10, affirms the following appointments by the mayor. Susan White, Public Safety Commission, term expires June 30th, 2023. Ellie Mandel, Crossroads Cultural Districts Committee, term expires after completion of project.
Do I have a second?
Second, Ricketts.
All right, thank you. Okay, the motion's made and seconded. Discussion. Normally, we have a portfolio on the nominees or the people to be affirmed. Looking through our packet, I don't see any bios on either Susan White or Ellie Mandel. Does anyone have any? Does anyone have any information on either one of them? For that reason, I'm going to ask that you make a motion to table this and it goes to full council because we don't have the backup. Councilor Jarvis.
Yeah, I was going to make that motion. I was going to state the same thing, that we received nothing, no letter of recommendations or no bio from these folks. So I'd like to make a motion that we table it and we send it to the full council without
recommendation
from this committee.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We'll send this to full council. I apologize for lacking on my piece. I should have noticed this, but I was getting so caught up in trying to get everything for the charter stuff that I went through the packet earlier today and I'm like, it's not in here. You know what I mean? So I appreciate that. So we're going to move.
I will take care of that tonight.
Okay.
I'll reach out to Director Letourneau and get this for us.
I'm sure it was just an oversight, but I just don't feel comfortable with this committee making a recommendation with no. If they were here tonight, it would have been different, or we could have talked to them or such. But thank you. Thanks for the understanding there. Okay, so I hope all of you got a chance yesterday to look at the legal questions that I had asked of the town attorney when it came to question 7-8. We had asked for some opinions, very basic opinions, to help us formulate the language for the question. And it was drafted in part by David Singer, who helped to carry this on because I asked for his recommendations on the questions. David, are you there? There you are. So I just want to make sure, open your mic, David, at any point, and feel free to talk with us as you see fit throughout the evening, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
So one of our first questions we asked was about 7-8 and 7-7. Before we start getting into the nitty gritty of this and all that, here is my thoughts, and these are only my thoughts as we are just discussing this item. Let's talk about 7-8. As you know, we had a public hearing and we had about 10 people speak at the public hearing, and all of them spoke on 7-8. Out of all the charter recommendations from the Charter Review Committee, really the majority of the people were talking about 7-8, not even 7-7. It was really about 7-8.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to all of the people that reached out at that council and at that public hearing. And I've also talked with people that called me and emailed me. And I believe the best scenario for council, and this is once again, is just my opinion, is that we do put 7-8 forward as a public referendum question on the ballot, because it's one of those questions that this is a check and balance given by the charter. And I would feel much better if the community, our citizens, got to weigh in on this percentage. And it goes along in my thing. It's almost like giving ourselves a raise. You know what I mean? It's this is our check and balance. This is how the community can look at votes. So I think, to be transparent and to be interactive, I think it's best that we discuss making it a referendum question. So seeing that seemed to be the theme, I asked the Kathy and the town attorney to answer some questions on how we would draft questions and how that. David, can you kind of update us on that thought process on the 7-8 question?
Sure. If you are all right, so the question was, if you decide to place a ballot question about under 7-7, particularly discussing the change of the threshold needed to file a petition, the question is, how would that ballot question be presented so it has clarity for the voters and it answers the question that you want to have answered? So there were lots of options. We could put the whole ballot question. We could put the entire charter section on with everything changed and ask people if they wanted to vote for that. But it seems that if we narrow the concerns that citizens have, it's about the threshold number. So the attorney wrote back and gave us proposed language that we could use to narrow the concept into a question of, do you agree to change, the current threshold to a new threshold? And hopefully between 5 and 5:30 today, you received what that ballot question might look like. And so the suggestion is to make it simple, both for yourselves, so you'll get clear message, and for the voters, so they'll understand what they're voting on. In
Thank you,
relation
David.
to, okay, so that was the question. I think I've summarized what the
Right.
answer is.
Yeah, we wanted to see what by statute and recommendation from, did we have to put it all on there? And they basically said, you can have a question that's specific to the percentage. And that's very helpful because it doesn't confuse voters. It's not pick A, B, or C. It's, do you wish to change it from this to this as brought forward by the town council? We also want to bring this forward from the town council and not and do our own question that would go on the ballot, that question coming from the council. So that being said, David, did you have a comment?
I want there's another underlying legal issue that I think the committee should understand and the council should understand, which is that this is only the first step. There is a second step that once this is decided and then the council takes that information and amends the charter, the legislature has to approve it as well. So the position of the vote from the citizens is a step one. It's certainly a strong step. But so you should read that part of the legal opinion as well, just so you understand, as the legislators, what your role is in this process.
I know there's been a lot of discussion, and I think the thing that we should look at when we're talking about all of the charter recommendations is this isn't the first time they've shown up. These recommendations were looked at by a committee. The committee had members of every, there was citizens, there was counselors, there was mayoral recommendation. They were all on that committee. The committee, as we know, and Councillor Gilmore and Councillor Forgy, who are both on this call, they were both on that committee along with David Singer. And they looked at the charter, they looked at what was recommended, they weighed out the options, and they put forward a recommendation. They also had public input and a public opinion. And if you look through their recommendation that they forwarded from the committee, they told us what the public opinion was and how they reached the consensus that they were at. So we're not starting at square, at level one. This is like we got to get to 10 and we're somewhere around an 8. So we don't have to start it all over. We're looking at their recommendations. We're looking at the public opinion, and we're moving forward with what we think would be best. So I'm going to open it up a little bit at this point. And I believe that we this evening should come up with a recommended percentage. And that would be the thought for 7-8, which was the concern by most. I believe if you look through all of our dialogue during the public hearing and the input we had, there was the people that wanted to leave it at 5. There are the people that and the recommendation to go to 10, which was the recommendation by the Charter Review Committee. And I think in the course of doing things, in a very transparent and trying to compromise, I think we should come up with an alternative percentage in my way of looking at it. And the number that I talked to David Singer about, who was a proponent originally of 10, was going with a 7% threshold, which would be, actually a little less than half. 7.5 would be the piece. And we should really, keeping in mind, if we compromise and we go forward with a 7% recommendation, I think it kind of helps to bring everyone together on a mutual place. President Ricketts?
Yes. Thank you, Councilor Gwynn. I just want to say that I do agree with that. I think now is not the time to be splitting the community apart, that we've heard from a number of people, and I think 7% is good, and I do think it's doable. If something comes up and, this action is taken. So I, for one, am very in favor of doing the 7%, or if they want to go a little higher, like 7.5, something strange, but 10%, no, I just don't think we should get there at all. So thank you.
Other counselors, please. I want your opinions. I just wanted to kind of start where I was thinking of, that we should really think about the percentage, because the language just needs adjustment. Counselor Jarvis.
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in, Dan, on this. Yeah, we've heard from a lot of people. We've got emails and stuff like that. We had the committee's recommendation. It's funny that we come up with 7, or people are mentioning 7, because actually when we first got this document, I went through and made notes in my little notebook here one day when I was in the office working, and that was the number that I wrote down 7% down there, thinking that would be a compromise from what we're hearing from what I was hearing back then from the public, and what we heard in public comment, and what we're seeing now, and the emails that we're receiving now. I believe that 7 is a fairly approachable number, where they can get the number of signatures if needed. Believe me, I know that getting signatures is tough. I'm sure Sheila is finding out that she's out there collecting signatures now. So I think 7 is a good compromise. It's the middle of the road. It's actually closer to the number that the people that want 5 are requesting, and it's further away from the number that are people that were requesting 10. So I think it's a good compromise.
Can I clarify that when I was just looking at the one that came in today around 5?
Yeah.
So are we talking about 7% of all registered voters, or are we talking about 7% of the folks who voted in the most recent election? Because
Yep. Good. Very good question. David, do you want to answer that piece?
Yeah, I think it should be clear that the recommendation, and I think the people who spoke at the public hearing who said 5%, it was of all registered voters.
Okay, I might have been looking at the wrong email then, so I apologize.
No, not at all. That's a great question. You should hear me, Councilor Gilmore, when I try to talk to people about this, like the attorneys and stuff. I'm saying, I want to change 7.7 and 7.8 using 7.9. Can it be overturned by 7.10? At the end of my conversation, I don't know what I'm talking about. David.
Can I help out? Okay. So yes, there are 2 parts, the percentage and then what we're measuring against. It seemed arbitrary to the committee that we would use the language that's currently in the charter after reflection, because it's that standard is how many people showed up for the last election. So that's an arbitrary situation. So one year a lot of people show up, next year not a lot of people show up, so the petitions can be filed with different numbers. So we thought it better to take, and Sheila, you know that from being on the committee, we thought it better to use all registered voters as the standard, because all registered voters have the right to sign a petition, by the way, and then play the percentage off of that. So I'd strongly suggest that no matter what you decide, you make the measuring stick registered voters and then measure off of that. So if 7% feels good, like Ed said, then that's 7% of all registered voters, which right now would be a little over 900 votes, 900 people to sign the petition. But I would recommend that you not it's too arbitrary. We need to do away with the people who voted at the last election. So if that helps clarify, I recognize the names of people that are listening that came to the hearing. So it's registered voters talk off of that is my suggestion. Thank you.
I agree.
Councilor Elmer.
Yeah, I wanted to address an issue that came up in a lot of letters I've received, suggesting that we leave the percentage, have it be a multiple choice question on the ballot. And I understand, I've been told through the clerk, that that's not allowed, that you're not allowed to have a multiple choice question.
Correct. That's why, I'm not to cut you off, Councilor Elmer, but that's why I picked the middle one. That's why I went with 7.
I thought we should say, because there are people listening who wrote those
Yes.
letters, I think we should address it. I wasn't real keen on the idea because it felt to me like the council should make a recommendation, not one person getting people to write letters. So I'm with you there. The 7% has been bouncing around. It's been feeling to me for a while that there was a compromise sitting out there, and that all we have to do is grab it. Can I read something does everybody get this thing from Will Roberts?
Yes.
I thought he said it well. I just want to put it on the record.
Elmer, you can read anything you want. So
Okay.
go right ahead.
I'll do it quickly. It's inevitable that in any community there will be reasoned and principled dissent. It's also inevitable that in any community there will be a minority of citizens who are disruptive and petty, driven by personal pique rather than the overall well-being of the community. There's a great difference between dissent and disruption. If the threshold for initiating a citizen referendum is too low, the petty and eternally dissatisfied will too easily be able to create disorder in the governing process. If the threshold is too high, reasoned dissent and appropriate action will be stifled. Most people seem to agree that the current 2.5% threshold of citizen signatures to initiate a citizens referendum is too low and could lead to referendums based on pettiness and pique. A 5% threshold is still too low, and a 10% threshold is far too high. I urge the council to place on the ballot a 7% threshold and let the voters of Greenfield be gathered over a 30 and let the signatures be gathered over a 30-day period to commence once the town clerk and the town attorney have cleared the question. That little bit about how much time there is hasn't been addressed yet, but it is something that we do need to address. Anyway, this is all to say, I thought Will put it well. 7% seemed to me where we were headed, and I like that we seem to have some agreement on it.
Councilor Elmer, I would agree, and it was. I thought Will was well spoken when he talked to us at the public hearing, and he was one of the people that I was listening to the same thing we all were, the 7%, and you are correct in that it can't be a question. There can't be a multiple choice question on the ballot, so it has to be a specific number. I think for us to go too low or too high is not where we need to be right now. And I think Will said it very well. I agree. And we'll get back to some of the other stuff you talked about shortly. We'll have David speak to that. We did ask another question about the clearing days, and we have gotten an opinion that 5 days is enough for the attorney. And our council clerk has agreed that 2 days is enough for the clerk. So that will all play into the amount of days, but we'll get to that because that's separate from the percentage. And that's something that doesn't need to go to referendum. That's a vote by recommendation by council. President Ricketts.
Yes, I just want to dovetail off of what Council Elmer says, that I totally respect and really liked what Mr. Roberts had to say. And it's better that it did come from a resident and not a counselor to say some of those things that were said. But the 7% does a huge thing for me personally, is that it respects my job as a counselor. We handle so many things, and we're in deliberation for so many hours that if it's too low and it just flips on us, no one understands just how many meetings and hours it takes to come to a decision. So Mr. Roberts really said it in a way that is true, that we just can't do this because we can't just pick and choose what things might make us angry. So the 7%, I hope for all my colleagues, makes you still feel respected in the hard work that you do. That, once we say this, this is what we want because we are actually listening to our constituents. So
I agree. And one other point that I think it's a fun time to bring this up because I think we keep talking about 7-8, and that's where we're talking about the percentage. Does anyone know why we're not talking about 7-7? You know why, Councilor Elmer?
Well, first of all, the language that we were given on this is impossible on 7 and 7 that the lawyer gave us. I wouldn't want any voter in Greenfield to have to decide about that. I think the reason is no one gets the difference. And I've been trying to explain to people the difference between an initiative and a referendum and the two parts of the initiative. And and when you're done, they look at you like, why are you talking to me?
Yeah.
This is boring.
Phil, you're going to laugh when you hear the answer because it's even more simple than that.
All right. It seems like we don't need it.
It's already at 7.5.
7.5. Right. I tried to.
So why do we change it? It's at 7.5. Leave it alone.
Well,
what are you going to make it? You're not going to bring it to 10. We're not going to bring it to 5. We don't have to change it. It doesn't have to be on the referendum. All we have to do is change 7-8. 7-7 can stay. We can change the language. 7-7, we don't even have to put on the referendum question because it'll confuse people like you mentioned. It would be my recommendation. And remember, these are only recommendations from all of us till we decide what we're going to do collectively tonight. And then the council gets to debate this again. So anytime there's a decision by this committee, we're only an advisory board. So 7-7, the simple part, when David told me that, I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I felt like I wanted to kiss him because he's like, Dan, you don't have to change 7-7 as a referendum. If you guys vote to go 7, it's already 7.5 on 7-7. Just leave it alone. And so when we got to 7-7 tonight, and you kind of brought that up in a roundabout way, I think our recommendation from this committee and to the council is to leave 7-7 like it is, and we'll bring the vocabulary around it as a motion at some point, but it does not have to go on the ballot, which means we're not in a big hurry to get it put on for a vote. We don't have to, because once the percentage is voted on, we still have to come back and put that in a form of a motion to go forward. That percentage piece will just be a part of 7-8. But in order to get it on the ballot, we have to get the language approved by an attorney and get that back, and we're going to run short on time. So that's why we're not talking about 7-7 tonight, because I would like this body to recommend, if we decide 7% on 7-8, that we just leave 7-7 alone. Any other counselors have any opinion? And I'm not saying the language. Remember, I'm just talking about the percentages.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
You're going to hate me for this first one.
No.
So if we're talking about changing 7-8 to 7%, why wouldn't we change 7-7 to be 7% just so that they would match?
Because it'd have to be a separate referendum question for a 0.5%.
Okay.
That's the skinny of it.
That's fair. So my second question is, I don't think this is likely, but what happens if people vote against this? Is this just going to come back to us and we have to send out a different, have a new election?
No.
No.
We would leave it alone. I mean, we would
It would stay the same.
We would, if we ask the public, I believe when you put a referendum forward, I don't like using referendum to run government. It's not that's why they elect us. But in this case, I explained why I think referendum makes sense. We have to kind of live by the decision. If it's,
It means it just stays the same, or do we have to rework it? That's what I'm asking.
No.
David,
I don't think you can rework it. There are other options. I don't know what they are specifically, but Sheila, you can rework it. Just means that I guess I think what we're trying to do is politically create a situation where the folks that asked for 5% would be willing to vote for 7%. And the people who wanted 10% will be willing to vote for 7%, seeing that it's a compromise and that once it's on the ballot, there won't be a lot of letters to the editor or things being said that would say that this isn't good enough. You know what I mean? I think it's just a sensibility that that this would be the one that kind of gets through with a majority vote.
David,
That's
David, in layman terms, the 7%, it's the two portions of that are, is 4% initiation and 3%. How does that work?
Oh, I thought we were talking about 7-8. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 7-8. No, I'm talking about 7-8. So 7-8 is just a straight 7%.
Yes.
There's no breaking it down, right? That's what 7-7 did, which was so confusing, correct?
Yeah. Why don't we wait? Maybe I would suggest that we talk about 7-7 separately after.
Oh yeah, we don't have to talk about it. I just want to. But 7-8 is 7%, correct? There's no
Registered voters.
Correct.
At the last biennial election.
Right. It's not a breaking it down question like 7-7 would have caused. Councilor Elmer.
Yeah, I don't want to let go of 7-7 yet. I think Sheila hit on something. If we're going to have 7% for one, why not 7% for the other? There is the initiative does have a complexity where you have to come up with 2.5% signatures to get the thing rolling, and then if the council rejects it, then you have to collect the other. It imposes 2 signature collection periods.
On which question?
7-7.
Yeah, that's why we're saying if we.
Yeah, here's why I'm still talking about it.
Yeah.
Is that a simpler solution to 7-7? I mean, you'd like to just leave it alone because then we don't have to touch it.
Not really.
I'd kind of like to fix it so that it looks just like the referendum, so that it's a one-step process, 7%. We would have to put it on the ballot as a referendum, but it would look just like the other one, so it wouldn't be as difficult.
David, this is your expertise, not mine.
Okay, well, let's look at it. Let's look at it in a little bit of a different way. There's no reason why you shouldn't talk about 7-7, and if you want to change the style, that's fine. But I think you're on a journey where you want to bring this before the city council next Wednesday to vote on a ballot question that is pretty straightforward, and you've talked a lot about it with citizens. 7-7 has 2 philosophies that I think that your committee should talk about before you get to numbers. And then the council should talk about before it decides what to do and put it on the ballot. One is, do you want it so that people initiate legislation, come to you, and as a result of, if you reject that legislation, it goes right to the ballot? Or do you want to have a 2-step process where people have a lower threshold so that they can get to you with less than 7%, which means that, you might like it, you might not like it, you might alter it, then and then the supplemental is to make sure that there are enough people who want to see this get taken away from the city council and go to the ballot. That's the supplemental piece. So if you do the straightforward piece, then you're asking 7% of the voters to initiate legislation, which I think is not so easy to do. Right. It's kind of a momentum builder. Remember, the referendum petition, the 7% on 7-8, is a reaction to an event by the city council. 7-7 is a total groundswell of, I want this to happen, which is a totally different energy. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, Councilor Elmer. I mean, you're the council, but I can't imagine that you can get from here to there and discuss those policy issues in a week and get a ballot question that anyone would understand. So that was the only reason why I'm suggesting you put that aside, discuss that as you go over the rest of the charter, and then decide how you want to do it. And, you can put it on the ballot next year, for example, and make that next year's question. But if you put those 2 things on the ballot, I'm concerned it seems like the focus of the letters to the editor and the people who came is 7-8. Right. So that's my political recommendation. I know you don't need my political recommendation.
No, David. I think
that's how I would manage it, and I think it's fair to the community because they'll be more narrowly and simply focused on what the question is.
I think the piece that you just said, I don't want to discourage people for bringing things forward by telling them in 7-7 that they have to have 7% to initiate. I think the fact that it has the lower number is perfectly, the reason it was designed like that was for that reason. So I think we'll talk about 7-7 at another time, and we are going to continue our discussion on 7-8. Councilor Jarvis, if you had anything on 7-7, go ahead. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the button to work. Yeah, I have to agree. I think 7-7 and 7-8 combined on the ballot question is going to be too convoluted for people to understand. I believe we should have take care of 7-8. That seems like the consensus that we're hearing from the taxpayers and from the people that we represent. 7-7, we can have public hearings on it. We can get the consensus of the people, the citizens. We can get more of a feel of the council, and bring that forward at another time and get it on the ballot next year. I don't want to be rushing anything and have it too convoluted and too complicated, and people just strike a box to get rid of the question, or to answer the question in their best of their ability. So I think we should concentrate on 7-8 and come to a recommendation, because we need to get this on the ballot and we have a timeline.
Correct. And I think you're right in that. I don't want people just to think, if they're not in favor of 7-7 and they are in favor of 7-8 or vice versa, that they just check them both yes or check them both no, just because they're not sure which one's which and they just don't like any of them. So, people hate change anyways. And we already changed 7-8. This is not, we're going back closer to where it started out than where it is today. So, this has already happened once. Is there any more discussion on, are we all in kind of a general consensus at this point that 7% is something that we're looking at? Is there anyone that thinks 7 is not the right number? Let's start there. Is there anyone that wants to talk me into another number? Because, I'd love to listen.
I think we'll get pushback, but not fatal, is my sense.
That's fine. I mean, I think we're going to let people know that we listened and that we compromised and that it's the number that needs to be brought forward. Councilor Jarvis?
Yeah, at this time, Dan, I'd like to make a recommendation that we forward a positive recommendation to the city council for 7% of all registered voters. That is my motion to forward to the city council at this time.
Someone like to second that?
Yeah, I will second that piece. And I just wonder at this time, should we add in the number of days in that same motion or no?
I don't believe so. I think we want to talk about percentage, and then we'll go back to David and see if we need to tweak any of the language. I think, David, you sent out so the motion's been made and seconded, so we can have a discussion on the motion. David, you sent out something today at 5 something today concerning 7-8. Was it in the form of a question?
Yes.
And what was that question that you recommended?
I can read it.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Phil.
Should the Greenfield City Council, can you hear me? Should the Greenfield
Yes.
City Council seek to amend the city charter to increase the threshold for citizens referendum petitions under section 7-8 from the current amount/threshold of votes equal to 10% of the total number of voters voting in the most recent biennial city election, but not less than 2.5% of all registered voters as of the same date, to a new amount/threshold equal to 7% of the total number of registered voters registered in the most recent biennial city election, ?
Okay. So I think we can explain that. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't leaving anything fatal out by going with Councilor Jarvis' recommendation. So we have a motion on the floor to recommend the 7%, and then we'll talk about the rest of the question shortly. Is there any other discussion on the percentage?
I have a question on why we're talking about this separately from the timeline. Is the timeline not going to be on the ballot?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, that was the feeling of the town attorney that could be done as a separate piece, and that the question should be kept about the percentage, because that's what you want the input from the public on.
Okay. Perfect.
But we can change, we can talk about that again too. David, am I missing anything?
I mean, it's a good question, Sheila. If I can give you some background. So let's compare ourselves to other communities. First we were comparing ourselves to the cities that are close by, and we went to 10%, and people also drew us to Amherst, for example, which is the town that wants to be a city. We're the city that wants to be a town. And they have 5% of their registered voters, and they have 14 days in which to gather signatures. 5% of their registered voters is 850 people. So they have to get 850 signatures in 14 days. So just as a comparative, Northampton has 15% of their registered voters in 20 days. So what the committee was thinking, as you know, was to make it a shorter period of time for the lawyer review and the clerk review, so that there'd be 23 days left to gather signatures. And if there was a delay, we built a safeguard in that if there was a delay in the attorney past 5 days, then the days to collect signatures would increase by every day of the delay. And if there was a delay in the clerk providing the petition past 2 days after the city lawyer, those days would be added on. So the city couldn't frustrate the will of the people, couldn't frustrate the time limit of the people trying to get the signatures. So yes, right now, the committee's recommendation would be to keep the charter the way it is now, 30 days, because it's one voting cycle of the city council. You want to have the vote taken, the petitioners going, either they file it or they don't. When they file it, the city council can vote again. So you're losing one, you're keeping it online with the city council's voting calendar. And then the second vote takes place 60 days after the first vote. If you go past the 30 days, then you'll go past the chair's meeting, and you'll have 2 cycles now to wait for the second vote and to then put it into the ballot. So we were really wanting to keep the 30-day cycle as the longest period of time.
Right.
And we shrunk the other time. So
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, so that's it.
So it would remain 30 days is their recommendation, which seemed like the way to go about it for those reasons. But we shrank the lawyer's time and the clerk's time to give the petitioners more time.
Right, and the 23 days is more than Northampton's requirement to get 15% of their signatures, and is a longer period of time than Amherst to get 5% of its signatures, because their period is 14 days. So we're actually generous in that regard.
Sheila, did you have anything else? Will you follow up on that?
I think we lost Sheila briefly.
I think
Yeah.
we lost. Yeah, she was having bandwidth, so we think we lost her. She might be trying to log back on.
All right. Councilor Forgy, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
All right, Councilor Forgy, we haven't talked to you at all, and we are within the realm of numbers that you can speak. Do you have, as a very vocal person on this committee and doing a lot of the legwork for recommendations, are you comfortable with the percentage that we were going to vote on?
Yes, the committee, the charter committee itself, worked with various numbers, and I feel that on council floor, the decision will be made which a percentage of numbers needs to be put before the voters. So I am very comfortable with the process that we went through, the discussions that we all had, and the fact that the plan is at this particular point to get it out to council, so council can make a recommendation as to whether or not it goes on the ballot. And my assumption is during that particular process of discussion, will be another opportunity for more of us to weigh in on the 7%.
All right. Counselor, yeah, who are we missing? Is
I'm
Sheila's
sorry.
back.
Yeah.
Counselor?
My
I
internet-
didn't want to vote, Sheila, with you in limbo.
I appreciate it. I don't think I heard all of David Singer's answer because that's when it started to freeze up on me. But kind of what I was getting at is I think that there's this sweet spot where, I don't have a big problem with raising the number as long as we're not going to also shorten that time period. And we talked about that as a charter committee. And I just kind of wanted to make sure that we were, and I'm not asking this so much for my own knowledge, but just because I see that there are some folks on this meeting that weren't necessarily at these meetings when we were talking about this back in March. So I'm kind of just like getting at the process for their benefit also.
No, that's good. And David did a good job in showing that the 30 days, what we are shrinking is the amount of response from the lawyer and the amount of response from the clerk's office, which actually gives the petitioner the 23 full days, which is more than any of our peer communities. David?
Sheila, the current charter says 15 days, the lawyer has 15 days and there's no time limit for the clerk and there's no safety valve. So theoretically, the way the charter is written now, if we only change the percentage, it would be a very short window. So you might want to let the community know when you're talking about this that everybody's sensitive to the timeline and that it's going to be significantly longer based on this increase.
Yeah, I was just trying to bring that more to the forefront because
That's great.
It's something that we did spend a lot of time talking about.
No, I think it was a good point, just so people don't say, oh, now they made it harder. We're going to have more days for the collection of signatures than we did before with the 15 days for the lawyer, now down to 5. And what we did in the legal review, which we sent to all of you in this committee, we asked the attorney, did they think 5 days was appropriate? And they said yes. We didn't just randomly pick it. We then asked the attorney if the clerk could we mandate 2 days for the clerk? And in paraphrasing, the attorney said she can't tell the clerk what to do, but our clerk said 2 days is more is standard turnaround for that kind of information. So we're good. All right, going back to the motion that's on the floor from Councilor Jarvis. All those in favor of a recommendation from this committee to make the percentage of 7%.
Of all the registered voters.
Of all the registered voters. Thank you, Ed. Why don't I just do a quick roll call? Councilor Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilor Jarvis.
Aye.
Councilor Elmer. Councilor Elmer.
Aye. Sorry.
Councilor President Ricketts.
Yes.
I would also like to vote as chair, and I vote yes. We will send a positive unanimous recommendation to full council. It is my intention to get this drafted in a form of a question, which will get sent out to the full body. So we have the potential of being able to leave that council meeting with the question on its way to the attorney for approval. So then it can go to the ballot. David?
I also wanted to let you know, and I hope you bring this to the attention of the full council, that if you put it on the ballot, it cannot be petitioned.
Right.
Correct. And that's also in the attorney's opinion.
That's really important. Rather than voting on it and without putting it on the ballot, which can be petitioned, putting it on the ballot is not subject to petition. So it will go on the ballot as you choose.
So when we finally draft it in a final form on council floor, that will go on the ballot as we chose to do as a council. So I thank you for that. I think that was a big piece of this. I don't think we need to discuss 7.7 this evening. Councilor Forgy, one of the things, we got a couple of things from Councilor Forgy attached to our agenda tonight. One was Public Safety Commission, and one was Board of Assessors. But before we get into those, and I don't know if this is the best time to address those, Councilor Forgy, one of the things that I talked to President Ricketts about was, I hate this word, but we have some like housekeeping segments of the charter, which are changes in some vocabulary and some words along that line. Could you address that for us tonight and tell us what you're thinking of how we can move that along so we're making progress at every full council meeting?
Yes, I'd be happy to. The real important piece that everyone needs to know and pay attention to is that they need to be bringing their full charter draft to meetings after they've read through them. If you look, for instance, on our agenda tonight, it'll say Article 1, Incorporation, short title definitions, Section 1 through 7 definitions. There are no changes to those. This is what the committee has reviewed, and the committee has brought it forward. Basically, it is just definitions, and there's been no language change. The only thing that I would point out is on page 7, when they are defining the word voters for the city of Greenfield, there's an asterisk. And that's really important because the discussion that the committee had and the reasons why they considered changing the definition, for instance, is included there. So in this particular instance, if you took Article 1, if you took it into the committee, into the council next Wednesday night, you could probably review Article 1. You could discuss what was being said about the changing the definition of a voter. You could vote to keep it as it is, or you could vote it a different way. So those are the kinds of things that we're thinking about when we talk about there's some language that needs to be changed because there were suggestions. There's basic things that are, changing pronouns, gender neutral language, those types of things. Mm-hmm. But a number of these articles should go very quickly on council floor with people being able to discuss what was recommended. And I think that they could be voted on, and we could move forward to some of the articles in which there was a lot of discussion and a lot of controversy, and so again would be able to vote on whether or not to accept the language as proposed and whether they want to change or add or delete any of the language that was originally proposed by the committee.
So is it this committee's feeling that we should work with President Ricketts and say, at the next council meeting, we will discuss the language in Article 1 and Article 2? And then, or does this committee want to look at that language, which I think can be, kind of redundant, but we could also, in the regular packet, send out, like Councilor Forgy said, in Article 1, there's only one recommended change with that asterisk. We define that, send it out, and debate this on council floor instead of coming back with a recommendation on top of the recommendation. Because remember, we already have a recommendation. So what's the feeling of this body I just want to make it, move this along, not in a hurried manner, but we do have some articles, Article 6, the Board of Assessors. We've got Article 6 on public safety. Those are going to take a lot of time, both from this committee but we have Section 4, Section 5, Section 6, Section 7. Help me here. How do we want to move forward in our discussions on this? Counselor Forgy, are you still there?
I am.
How many changes do you think are recommended in Article 2, if you were to just guess? Is there a lot going on there?
Well, again, there's, yes, there are a number of language changes. The substance of the work that was done, really, the substance of the work is really the same. It is, for instance, just for an example, Section 2.2, Council President. It starts out with as soon as practical, after the councilor-elect has been qualified, and the committee changed it or suggested it be changed to say on the first business day of the new year, the members of the city council shall. So, I mean, it's those types of things. It's cleaning language, and it's just weighing in on the council weighing in on which piece of language is better, which piece of language sounds better. There's not a substantial move to, upset any of the officers listed or upset any balance of power or anything like that. It's just adding language. And in Section 2, there is quite a bit of language change.
Okay. So and that's where that horrible word of housekeeping comes in mind, because it's language changed by section. Right. Do we want to, as a committee, have a strike-through version made of an article at a time, like Article 1 and Article 2, showing the recommendation from the committee that we send out to full council and look at these on the floor? President Ricketts, your opinion?
Yeah, I think for all the housekeeping pieces, the sooner you get them to council floor, the better. I don't feel like A&O needs to really go through all that stuff. If we want to spend any time, I would go over the assessors piece and the public safety piece to make sure you have down pat really what you want to bring forward. I think Councilor Forgy's done a really good job on what she's thinking about there. So I think any housekeeping pieces, let's bring them to council floor and get started.
Councilor Jarvis? You're muted.
Yeah. Trying to get that little mouse down there sometimes is a chore. I have to agree. I mean, I went through it with a notebook and took notes and read through the changes and made little notes in my notepad here. And a lot of it, the hard work is done. I mean, the committee put all this hard work into it. It's easy reading if you read through it with the asterisks on them and the changes down below. It's fairly easy reading. It's quick and yeah, there's a lot of just house cleaning verbiage that needs to be cleaned up, and so it sounds and flows a little bit better. I mean, so I don't think we need to get weighted down on this. I think we could say like we're going to send Section 2 and Section
1 and 2.
3 to city council, whatever, and have them review it so they know that it's going to be on the agenda. Okay. So they have forethought on it. I think that's what we should be doing on the house cleaning items. Okay. That's just what I thought.
No, that was where I was. Councilor Elmer, opinion on that?
Yeah, that sounds fine. I do have a question about what if we have changes we want to make that aren't recommended by the committee?
Any councilor can bring that forward.
Yep.
Should I bring it to you guys first?
Yeah, I would write up what you're considering and get it to me. And then I will discuss it with President Ricketts and look at agenda items. But yeah, definitely. Anyone can do that. Some of the, there might be things in this committee report that are major pieces that really have to be sponsored pieces, but language is not one of them. These housekeeping pieces can move forward unless, we might find something on the floor that someone, all of a sudden says in Section 2-4, I was just reading this and I noticed that under expenses, the word blah, blah, blah. That's easy. We can do that on the floor.
Yeah. Councilor Elmer too. I think if it's not substantive changes.
Well, this is substantive. This would be substantive.
Oh, would it be? Yeah. So I think if any kind of time you could spend on it now, then at least there's some time that maybe I could reach out and research or look back to see what the Charter Commission actually did with that.
Well,
We may want them there.
to take it out of mystery, it's a simple change to have the term limit of counselors be 2 years and not 4 years. It's a one number
And
change.
see, and let me talk generally on that, Council Elmer. We have to make sure that our procedure is the right procedure for that change. Some things have to be voted on. Some things have to be, there's different procedures on different parts of the charter. Numbers are a big deal. So numbers and term limits, I believe, have to go through a separate process. But if you send it to me ahead of time, then I can follow up on that.
Okay.
So, Councilor Gilmore, obviously, if you have anything to add, please jump in. I don't want to not. But President Ricketts, do you think it would be appropriate, and maybe Councilor Forgy can, that we ask that Article 1 and Article 2 be on the next full council agenda for language changes?
Are you talking next week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, get a strike through version sent out of just what I want to do is I don't want to overwhelm people and keep sending out the entire, change of the entire charter. It's overwhelming. I'm sitting here days like this. This is what I sit at trying to figure out how to run these meetings. If we had one page, Article 1, this is the proposed asterisk change, and then these are the things in Article 2 and the reasoning. Anyone have any thought? We introduce them at the meeting as those changes and we move forward. Anyone have a problem with that? And could we do Article 1 and Article 2 at the next meeting? Councilor Forgy, does that make sense, as you are my guru of all things language change?
Yes, it does. I think it's fine.
Okay.
A lot of this, like was mentioned by Councilor Jarvis, the committee was very thoughtful. A lot of this hard work has already been done. There are some things. They want to change. Do we include the definition, say, in Article 1, of a voter being a resident alien? That would be the biggest debate that would come out of Article 1. And I think that that's a debate the council can have. And we can move on to the next, to Section 2, and there'll be other pieces that we can debate and set that way.
And at any point in time, I will discuss this prior with Councilor Ricketts. At any point in time, I think we've spent enough on, if we got hung up on Article 1 definition and we spent 45 minutes on it, I would table Article 2 to the next meeting and we move on.
Yes.
That's just going to be how it is. We are not going to spend 6 hours debating article questions. I'd like 2 at a time so we can move forward and have something on the agenda. And if we can't reach them, and if we table a single one, that's fine too. But I think we try to do 2 per meeting, or 1 per meeting as we get, when we get to Article 6, that's going to have to be chopped up into multiple interpretation. Any other comments on that recommendation that we ask for Article 1 and 2 to be forwarded to the full agenda of next week's meeting? Anyone? David?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I would just take some care in the changes are really important. They're every 10 years. This is an amendment to the charter. It's not that I disagree with your discussion. It's just that the goal would be that when you're having these discussions with 13 counselors present, everybody has to be up to speed, I think, the same way. And how the council is set up to do that is that you do it at A&O first, and the counselors know it's on A&O and they could attend and listen, and then it goes to the floor. Anytime you skip A&O and bring it right to the floor of the council, you're subjecting yourself to some level of confusion. And I guess, again, you do as you see fit, obviously, but the goal would be that everybody's on the same page. Because if you have people raising their hands and saying, I don't know what you're talking about, that's not going to look good for the public, and it's not going to be a good way to amend the charter. So like a resident alien is not that's not a housekeeping thing. That's not because we talked about how far do you go? Is it voting? Is it running for office? There's a lot of stuff to talk about. So if it went through A&O and the 5 wise people in A&O spoke about it and then made a recommendation, if it was split, then everybody would know that's then maybe you decide to cut some of that down. If it's not split, then you can support it. But somebody has to speak at the meeting and bring the council up to speed as to what you're talking about, so everybody's on the same page. So just be careful that if you throw something on next week's meeting, it's 7 days for people to suddenly get educated about this. You are all much more educated because you're on A&O and you've been reading this charter over and over. You feel comfortable with it. So that's my only concern about this process is if you feel comfortable that everybody's on the same page, then that's kind of my jurisdiction. But I would hope that
David, don't worry about that. I mean, you're a past counselor. You know how this works, and you've done more on the charter than most.
I think I actually think I think A&O should consider because you've become now we've handed it to you. You've become the committee.
Right.
You've become the charter committee, and you're going to become educated about the charter as you learn this. And if I can help, or Councilor Forgy or Councilor Gilmore can help, Councilor Wheeler can help you get educated, that's fine. But if you talk at these meetings, get educated, you have a much better chance of 5 of you helping the other 7 or 8 members understand what's going on, rather than just throwing it on the floor. And then you don't even know how each of you have decided on very much of this. And so you may all be all over the place. So I'm just asking you to use caution in the process.
No, that's why we're having this discussion.
And you should be, I think you all, the 5 of you, should become the new charter committee. So you're the committee that now has to get up to speed and recommend to the rest of the council how you think it should happen. Of course, they make the final vote, but they're going to rely on you. And luckily, you have 2 other committee members who are on the charter committee. So you'll have 7 people that are up to speed. So now you've got 7 people who know what the charter means, helping the other members. So you're not going to get a goofy vote.
Councilor Forgy. In section 2, not Article 2. Article 2, not section 2. In Article 2, how much of those changes? I mean, some things had a lot, and some things had a lot less. Is section 2 compromised of more language? I'm looking at if we have to take Article 1 at our next A&O meeting and kind of go through that whole definition, we might have to do that because, as former Councilor Singer just pointed out, that might have a little more, discussion than some. Are there pieces of it that are simply turning language that we could bring forward for next meeting?
If you're talking about Article 2,
yes,
actually there is some housekeeping pieces, but there is also there's got to be a discussion on page 9, for instance, when we are fixing the language regarding council president, council vice president. You'll see the suggestions of the committee on how to make that language stronger. So that is, let me just take a look here through this.
While you're doing that, let me just talk to my committee for a minute. We have 6 months from the time this thing was given to us to make our recommendations. If we break all of these sections into separate meetings, we won't have enough time to have this final document. That's my only piece. If we took section 1-7, and talked about the definition, and then we look and we have to do 2-2 and 2-4, I'm just wondering if we're going to be in compliance to have this turned around. We have, was it 6 months, President Ricketts, from the time that we received it? Does someone remember that element?
I don't. Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, what do we want to do? Did we want to do it by the end of this year? To be in the 10th?
David? there
Yes.
is,
I don't know the rule. I mean, I think the rule is there so that citizens can force you to make these amendments. You know, there has to be, you can't just sit on it. If politically you don't like the recommendations, you can't just sit there and not do anything. So
I did ask for an opinion from the attorney on the time frame. I just know, I think it's, I asked for, was it 6 months from when we received it or 6 months from when we introduced it? You know, but there is a, I want to say it's a 6 month time frame, and we're probably already a month in.
7, you've dealt with section, you know, you've dealt with 7, 8, which is good.
Mhm.
You have to decide. I mean, I guess you could break up, you could do 3 sections a meeting, and if you hit some hard stuff, then, you know, then whatever. I don't know. That's
No,
what
no,
we did. I mean, we had a year and we had to break it up. So we basically build from the ground up. Take the stuff that you can talk about and talk about it, and then take the stuff that's harder and put it off to other meetings. You know what I mean? So I don't know. However you want to do it, but we broke it up into sections. You can do 2 sections at a time, and just people have to be ready to chat.
Councillor Gwynn,
yes.
if I may.
Yeah, of course.
I know that we've been about an hour at the meeting, but I'm in anticipation of bringing Article 1 and 2 forward next week. Is your committee interested in going through these 2 sections right now, this evening?
Which 2 sections, 1 and 2?
Oh, Article 1 and 2.
I don't have a problem even if we take on Article 1. The problem is, and I'm not trying to, because David Singer's been nothing but an asset, but if we did 2 sections per meeting, we'd need 19 months. Which,
Well, yes.
which can't happen.
Right, so we need to start. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe
So let's, do we want to talk about Article 1 at this point tonight and see where we are with Article 1? Opinions?
I stand ready to assist.
Councilor Elmer?
Well, I was going to suggest that the resident alien bit, we haven't discussed it. If we could, that seems like the hard discussion. And then once you've decided one or the other, then making the changes through the rest in the language is the trivial part, right? We've already got one tough topic that we're bringing up at the meeting, right? Section 7.
Right.
Do we
Not
want
all.
to have do we want to have a discussion about alien resident now, and then be able to bring that up to the full council? Is that, or does that seem like a bad start? Any thoughts?
I think, if I may, I would say that this is probably something where we want folks to have more than 1 week's notice.
I would tend to, that's, I want to make sure we just have to keep on a timeline. And it's up to this committee to figure that out. I mean, this is our first discussion meeting, so this is all good. This isn't a bad thing. We just got to figure this out. I'm just saying that if we only did 2 sections a meeting, we're going to be 3 times as long as we have legality to bring this back. Councilor Jarvis?
Yeah, I don't see, Dan, I'm a little confused. If we did section 1-7 and then we did 2-1, 2-2, 2-4, 2-8, that's 2 complete sections. That's what I'm seeing. And then the rest of the changes are like section 3 has a bunch, section 4 has a bunch, so we could tackle those at the next meeting. Then you got 5, and of course 6 is going to take a while. There's quite a few changes to 6, and that's it because we've already taken 7 on.
That's what I was just going to ask Councilor Forgy. In Article 7, there's 7.2, 7.7, 7.8, 7.9, and 7.12. 7.7 and 7.8, we did not really talk about 7.7. That's going to take some time on there. What about 7.2 and 7.9 and 7.12? Are there pieces of 7 that are going to need more than 7.7 and 7.8? Do you know?
Yes, I do know. 7.2 deals with preliminary election. And again, there are there are a lot of pieces that were included as background information and talking about, home rule provide and things like that, home rule being provided. There are pages, for instance, if you want to take 7, so page 51, there is something that needs discussing. 52, 53, 54, okay, and 55, 56 is where you have to pick up and review again, but you've already done those. So there are the beginning parts of 7.7 and 7.8 and 7.9 are all taken care of. And so it's really the beginning parts of 7 that you would have to, have to take a look at.
Okay.
It's what's the way this document was put together. The way this document was put together is as an entire document. And so there are some pages that the language has not changed at all. And the document was very well edited, that anything that presented a change or a language change or a concept change or needed some discussion is marked. So anybody going through can actually see the beginning of 7 is going to need a few pieces of discussion, but you've
Okay.
already tackled 7.7, 7.8, 7.9.
Right.
So, it's
All right.
not
So we'll have our.
organization.
All right, so we'll have our recommendation on 7.8. People, I need some direction. I don't know what you want me to do for the next meeting. Obviously 1-7 with that definition is going to take some time. I don't know if we're prepared to start doing that tonight. So that means that we could look at Article 2. Article 2, do we want to look, is there anything in 2.1 and 2.2 and 2.4 that we could talk about tonight, Chris, that would be able to be changed sooner than later? Is there just some housekeeping pieces of that we could start with?
So, section 2.1, okay. Section 2.1 really talks about the composition of the legislative branch, the term of office. It references 2 things, with whether we want to keep 13 members, whether we want bigger or smaller, okay? The next piece is when it talks about the eligibility of a voter, it references back to resident alien. So if you go ahead and have the discussion under the definitions in section 1 about resident alien, you will answer some of the further questions that will be coming forward in the document itself.
I think that's our answer. I mean, our answer is we got to start with 1 and work to 7. So it's like trying to end the alphabet with the beginning. You know what I mean? If we change the stuff in 1 as we move along, it'll answer stuff in further articles. And that's what you just explained, Chris, that this document's drafted to go in progression.
It is.
So let's go back to Article 1 then. And what is the recommended changes in Article 1? What are the recommended changes? Let's start there, and we might discontinue this till our next meeting, but let's talk about Article 1. Did we lose her?
No, are you talking to me?
Yes, Chris.
Sorry. Are you talking
That's
to
Chris.
me?
So what is in Article 1, what are going right from the top, what in Article 1 are the recommended changes from the committee?
David, be my guide, okay? There are no changes on page 5. That language is the language that has always been in the charter. On page 6, there are no changes. That language has always been in the charter. Those are the first 2 pages of definitions. On page 7, you go down to item O. The word voters is the only change that the committee discussed as far as definitions are concerned. And you'll see at the bottom of page 7 that there were suggestions that were made to consider adding resident alien to the definition or add a separate definition entitled resident alien. And basically, you'll see, if you want me to read it, I will. If a separate definition is added, you must take care to add this to other places in the charter where the word voter is used, such as sections which define those persons eligible to run for office in Greenfield. The reason to add a separate definition is for resident aliens is that resident aliens who may be green card holders or persons that meet the IRS substantial presence test are expressly barred from voting in national elections, but have been granted voting rights in local elections by a handful of municipalities across the country. So the question is, should alien residents, if granted the right to vote, also be granted the right to run for office in Greenfield? So you see how one is going to build on the other. So the committee discussed the issue. Some members stated that being a U.S. citizen should be the defined limiting qualification of a voter, while others stated that allowing a resident alien to vote may be permitted. However, the committee did not decide if a resident alien should be permitted to run for elected office. So that's why there needs to be a discussion on how do you define.
Let's get some opinion. I mean, this is section 1. David?
I guess what I would, to help you think about this, I suggest you don't get hung up on how the rest of the charter will carry that definition, because you could change this definition section so that things work themselves out. I think the question is, simply put, would we like to add resident aliens as a voter in Greenfield elections? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, then you go to the next question. Well, are there other things that a resident alien can do beyond that? And maybe you don't even want to have that discussion at this point in time because you have other things to talk about. So maybe the thing is just, do we or don't we want resident aliens to be able to vote in Greenfield elections? If the answer is yes, that's the definition section can be changed, and all the places where voters is stated can be changed. And that's a housekeeping thing, and somebody could help you do that, and that's fine and dandy. But I think the substantive issue is, simply put, yes or no, have that discussion, and then you can make a recommendation, and you could actually get that change, in my opinion, brought before the city council and decided. But don't get hung up on federal elections, running for office. I think those are other important things to consider, but I think they're separate from the very basic question.
So
Allow resident aliens to vote in Greenfield elections.
So what is the definition of a resident alien? The reason to add a separate definition for resident alien is that resident aliens who may be green card holders or persons that meet the IRS substantial presence test are expressly barred from voting in national elections, but have been granted voting rights in local elections by municipalities across the country. So,
Councillor Quinn, both Councillor Wheeler and Gilmore might be the ones that could provide the answers to your question.
Okay. Councillor Gilmore, do you want to talk on this?
So this was folks who are in the U.S. legally that live in Greenfield, whether or not we would allow them to vote. So, for example, if you have someone who marries a U.S. citizen and they're staying here legally, they've got a green card, but haven't been naturalized yet, it would be folks like that.
And What was the consensus of your committee, David, on this? It was, some members stated that being a citizen should be defined limiting qualification of voter. Is that what we're looking at right now, or are we looking at the definition?
No, I think the definition will take care of itself because resident alien has a definition in the law, so use that legal definition. And I think Sheila stated it summarily pretty well. I think the recommendation was, there was no recommendation. It was just, this one, there was no recommendation. It was just the recommendation was to bring it to your attention and let the council have a hearty discussion about it and decide what they want to do. But but remember, it's only about resident aliens being able to vote in Greenfield elections. That's it. That's the question before you.
And resident aliens, as Sheila just described, and I'm just trying to make sure we're on the right track, are they have a green card, but they haven't been naturalized? Is that what we're saying?
I think that there are other folks that fall into that definition, but what we're talking about is these are folks that are here legally. Like they would have to prove, like they were talking about the IRS and whatnot. Folks that are eligible for like a driver's license and what have you.
All right, let's open this up. President Ricketts.
So I guess my question
There's a legal
is
definition for it out there somewhere. So
that if we were to say that they could vote in local elections, they still couldn't vote federally, correct?
Correct.
Right. So, yeah.
it's only about voting in Greenfield. Do we want resident aliens to be added to the voter list to vote at Greenfield? The end. That's it. That's your decision.
Right. Yeah. So my personal belief would be, I would say no. I would say let them go on their journey to be able to vote nationally, and then it all comes together at the end. So that's where I stand.
Councilor Jarvis.
Thank you. When I read this, I had to think about it quite a bit. And then I talked to other people that have made the journey to get in their citizenship. And a couple of them knew that this was coming up, and they spoke very passionately that they worked hard to get their citizenship to vote. They knew that was part of their right that they were going to be entitled to. And that was a big part of them when they came to this country was their freedom of speech, their freedom of religion, their freedom to vote. It made them work hard for that. I think it gives them something, it gives the person something to strive for. And I think if we change this in the Greenfield Charter, I think it's kind of like saying, we don't care about your hard work that you put forward to strive to do that. I think it's an outcome that people that want to be here in the country should strive hard to get. I know it's a convoluted process to do now. It's not as easy as it was when our forefathers came over to Ellis Island on New York. And a lot of them learned how to speak English and take the test to be a citizen. But I believe that should be the goal. And we shouldn't make it any easier. We should make them go forward on their journey to receive that right. Just my feelings on it. Thank you.
Councilor Elmer.
I could sort of argue this round or flat, which maybe isn't helpful.
Argue it.
Well, if the resident alien is paying taxes to Greenfield, then they might consider that they have a right to have some representation and that they ought to be able to vote in Greenfield. On the other hand, you want a voter to have roots in the community and care about the community enough that if they're voting for the best for the town. I guess having argued it round and flat, I guess I like Councilor Jarvis's answer that it's explicitly a goal of citizenship that you get to vote, and I'm not sure why this municipality would jump over that.
Councilor Gilmore, did you want to speak with us on this?
No, actually, I'm actually kind of curious how many folks would fall into this definition. I know one person personally, but I don't know how many people would really be impacted by this? And I think I would want to know more about that.
Sure. Sure. Any other discussion? Councillor Forgy or President Ricketts?
Yeah, and I think being careful about whether they're a taxpayer or not is a tough one, because I know the one thing that I get approached from are people who are business owners. They wish that they could vote in Greenfield because they own businesses here and they pay taxes. And they really.
That's a great, I've heard that. We lost you, Penny. We're all chuckling because your frozen picture was pretty funny for a second. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So yeah. So I'm gonna stick with my original thought, because I do think about business owners. And
so I guess the question before us right now is, the suggestion was made to consider adding resident alien. I'm feeling that the majority at this point, and this is just me, would like to leave it as it is. So we're not really making a recommendation from this committee to add resident alien. Councillor Gilmore wanted more information, which we can get for full council floor, if that's what it needs. Am I wrong in that thought, as I'm trying to steer this forward, that it was a suggestion to consider adding it? It's not a definition right now, so the definition would not change. Councillor Forgy, is that correct on that assumption?
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor Jarvis.
So I would like to make a recommendation that we do not change the word in under voters. We don't is not to change the word in at all.
second,
Under 170.
That motion has been made and seconded. So the discussion would be that we leave section 1-7 definition O voters as is, and not look at that recommendation. And that would be what this committee would put forward. Any other discussions am I right in that thought?
correct.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So with this motion, it means that it would go to the council floor next week, or would it go next month?
It would. This I would like to put on as the only other thing besides 7-8 and send to the council floor next week.
There's no other easy housekeeping ones for this?
I don't. We could look at section 2-1 or 2-2, but we'll get to that. But I was thinking that if we could get through this piece, because I think this might take up time on the council floor, President Ricketts.
Okay.
Councilor Elmer.
Yeah, I sort of would like to hear the argument for it. I'm not sure I did it justice, and I wouldn't mind having the full council thrash it out.
Well, that's why I think if we bring whatever this recommendation is, it's only a recommendation, and we can take it on. And I'd like to get Councillor Gilmore's question answered also by talking to.
Yeah, I think that's my only hesitation, is I really want to know like what we're voting on and what the impact is before we take it up. And I just don't see us getting that information in a week.
Well, let me start at the clerk's office and find out if she, if there's a way to know that. You know what I mean? I don't know the answer, but I will look into it. So we have a motion on the floor. All in favor of sending a motion, a recommendation to council to leave section O as is?
Aye.
Councillor Gilmore,
Abstain.
Councillor Jarvis,
Aye.
Councillor Elmer,
Aye.
Councillor Ricketts.
Aye.
All right. We will send that recommendation with the to council for next week, and I will look into the question raised by Councilor Gilmore.
You vote, Dan?
I did not vote. I will also abstain. Okay. Councilor Forgy,
Yes.
Section 2-1. Article 2, Section 2-1. Is there anything in there that is going to require being looked at?
There are two things I believe that
Right.
need to be looked at. So under A, composition, there was a discussion, and we did get members of the public to speak to us about whether or not the current number of counselors is the correct one. And also, it also talks about the composition of one from each precinct and 4 at large. So the suggestions were, like it says, either reduce or increase the number, but the committee made the decision that they're comfortable with the current number and the current arrangement. So that's a point of discussion.
Sure.
If you go to item B, term of office, there's no change to the
Okay,
language.
let's stop right there for a moment,
Okay.
Councilor Forgy. Let's talk about composition. Is there anyone in this committee that feels that this should be brought forward with a change when there's no recommendation from the committee? And is there any counselor on this committee that feels that composition should be a point of discussion? I see none myself, but any recommendations?
I would recommend that we move this forward and just, note out loud to the full council that these were topics that were discussed. And if someone else wants to make an amendment, they're welcome to do so.
Very good. Do we need a motion, or is that just a recommendation?
Language stays the same. There's no.
Right.
So we'll just bring that up on the floor. So 2-1, President Ricketts can go on the agenda as no recommendation, and the councilors can look at it. Term of office is going to stay. So that part of 2-1. Eligibility, we have a problem with. Go ahead, Councilor Elmer.
Yeah, I sent you a note. I'd like to recommend that we change that to 2 years.
Okay. So let's talk about that a little bit. David, can you give us any background on why 4 years went from 3 years to, when I was a counselor, it was 3 years, and then now it's 4 years? And can you give us a little history lesson?
Yes. Initially, when we became a city, we didn't change the cycles. So each year we had an election, a city election. And we divided the council into 3 groups. Every 3 years, a different group of 4 and 5 would be eligible for election. So 3 years worked for the fair division of the council into election cycles. Then we were told by the Commonwealth that we were a city, we had to change our election cycle to be in November, and it's biannual. So we had to have an even number. So the question comes up whether we should do 2 years or 4 years. It's, again, this will help Councilor Elmer in making his proposal, I think, because you're going to have probably the same discussion. The question was, if you have 2 years, then the entire council will be up for election every cycle. You can't split up the council. If everybody serves 2 years and we only have elections every 2 years, you can't split the council into cycles of votes. So the only way to split the council was to have 4 years. You can, it's okay. I mean, I don't have any personal opinion about it. I think I may have voted for the 4 years just because I personally like the idea of having the council. So every 2 years, we have half the council up for vote. That was the reason, ostensibly. Otherwise, every 2 years, the entire council runs for office, for better or for worse. It's like House of Representatives. So if you think that's a better idea, again, as a charter drafter, I have no problem with that, but that was the reason for it. And also so that people weren't running for office, again, 5 minutes into their,
Right.
they have 4 years to get used to their position. So thank you for asking.
No, thank you, David. Councilor Jarvis, I'll go to you next, but let me just, I think, although there's times I wish it was a 1-year term, but I think when you go a 4-year term, I think having a 2-year turnover of the entire 13-member council could be disastrous. Leadership, a board of officers, people that know. There could be a situation where you have 13 people that have never been on a council be elected. You'd have 13 new councilors. Now, would it happen? I don't know. That's the will of the voter. But if we allow it to happen, it could happen. And you could have 13 people that have never been councilor, and one of them has to be president and vice president and treasurer and committee chairs when they have never served on the council. And then the other thing is, we don't do it a lot in this case. It's happened a little bit when someone wanted to run for mayor and they were a counselor, that they start, wearing a tie to meetings. I don't know if we need that done, immediately halfway through their first, it would be their first year, and then they're going to start campaigning already for their next term as a counselor. So that would be my fear. Councilor Jarvis?
Yeah, I have to agree that 4 years is, I think 4 years is a good number. I mean, myself, it's a learning curve when you first become a city councilor. And believe me, I had to be involved with city council quite a bit in my years of the final years of my job, which is sometimes city council was frustrating to me, but now I'm one of those frustrated people, making other people's lives frustrated. But I think it's a huge learning curve. There's a lot to learn, and I think in 2 years, if you ended up with 13 people that didn't know anything about city council, to me, it would be devastating to the city. I don't think it would be fair to the taxpayers. It wouldn't be fair to the citizens. I just think 4 is a good number, because at the end of 4 years, hopefully you've gained a lot of knowledge. I just don't think you'd gain that knowledge in a 2-year period. I don't think it would be fair to the taxpayers, and I think it could be devastating to trying to run a city. I mean, city councilors run a city, so I don't think 2 years would work.
Councilor Alner?
Well, I think getting 13 new members is kind of a straw horse. It's unlikely. Past history suggests that people just run again without opposition as long as they want. I think the problem the city council has is getting new people to run. And I think 4 years is burdensome. That's my experience. And I'm not the only one who feels like this is a tough slog. If you take the job seriously, it's a lot of homework. It's a lot of long meetings. And I think 4 years, you risk, the other risk is that people are in too long. And we've seen counselors deteriorate in the space of 4 years, where they're hardly functioning as counselors. I'm not going to name any names, but I'm not sure the 4 years has reflected well on the council. I'm willing to. I thought it should be discussed, and I actually would like to have it discussed with the full council.
Don't ever worry about discussing things. That's what we're due. Just on history, Phil, when we're talking about, you have to watch when you're changing charter that you don't allow a precedent that could happen. Now, I remember asking at one of our meetings, and I can't remember what it was. I asked at a meeting if it had ever happened, and they said, no, it's never happened, but there's nothing that says it can't. And that's what we have to be careful about. Now, hypothetically, you are right. Do I really think 13 counselors could flip over in a year, in a vote? I don't know. But we have to look down the road, not today. We got to look down the road and say, could there be a time where we tank our city because we allowed the law to change so you could get 13 new counselors all at once? Any other counselor want to speak?
I would like to say, I think that I could go either way. Like, Phil was talking about arguing round and flat earlier. I feel like I could do this either way too. I think that sometimes a 4-year commitment sounds like a really long time. You know, I mean, I enlisted in the Air Force for 4 years and it felt like forever. And chose to reenlist, right? And then, you know, same thing with city council. I signed up and I ran for 4 years and now I'm running again for another 4. So I can see how people would be intimidated by that. 2 might seem more reasonable. But on the other hand, I have to say, and, you know, I don't even feel like this is like a personal feeling on my own part because we're all only human, but, you know, the time that it takes to go out and gather your signatures and knock on those doors, I have limited free time. And that's time when I'm not actually responding to my constituents. It's time when I'm getting signatures to get on the ballot. So that takes away my attention, you know, and I think that the same would be true of anyone because it requires some effort. Even if no one else is running against you, you still have to clear that bar. So I think that this is something worth having a longer conversation about. And it would be nice to hear from other counselors and maybe even from the public if they want to talk to us during public comment about this. Because there might be people out there who would say, if it was a 2-year term, I would be happy to try it out. I mean, but I could have the wrong answer. But I'm glad we're talking about it.
Anyone else? President Ricketts, are you there?
Yes. Yeah, so I think the 4 years is good because it sets the expectation, you know. If people come in, they only know they have 2 years and, you know, it's sort of not for them and stuff. They can go, you know, people know now they don't have to run. They can go at any time. But 4 years, you know, you get on committees that you like, you start really getting in depth with it, and you learn and you move around and you learn other things. I think running every 2 years, it's a lot of work. And it also costs a lot more money. And that's the other part, which I think is sometimes a hindrance to some people running, is trying to fundraise money to run. And so every 2 years, we can't be asking people to do that. I think in 4 years, it's good because you have an opportunity to work your way up. You know, like I was chair of A&O at one time, chair of EDC, I did CRE, I did vice president and now president. I would only be able to do that had I been in there all those times. And I did that when it was all at 2-year increments. So I really disliked all that campaigning I had to do. But 4 years, you know, it gives you a longer shot at things. And I mean, you don't have to stay. Things come up. Things happen in people's families or lives and stuff. So if it's not for them, they can step back. But yeah, I can't wait to have the whole discussion with people. But yeah, I'm for the 4 years.
All right. I'm just trying to take section 2 and discuss it. Then we'll recap on section 2 because right now we haven't come to any kind of decision on anything. And the reason I wanted to get to section 2-1C is eligibility. You know, the definition in Council 4G, you can go in if I'm wrong, but it says any voter shall be eligible to hold the office of council at large. A precinct councilor shall be, at the time of the election, be a voter to the precinct, blah, blah, blah. But voter goes back to what we talked about in 1-7.
Right. So until the council has the full discussion on it, we don't do that.
And I think what happens is you don't really have to have a discussion on eligibility because 1-7, that'll answer that.
Right, exactly.
If we vote on 1-7 on council floor, then we don't have to answer C.
Right.
So that's section 2-1. Composition. We have a situation where we thought at this point we would move it forward as is for further discussion. And section 2-1B, term of office. Would we like to vote on a recommendation from this committee at this point on this, or what's your poison?
If it makes it easier, I'll make a motion that we change it to 2 years, and then we can vote on it and then pass the result of that vote on to the full committee, full council.
Sure.
Let's
Do I have
go.
a second on that?
I'll second it to keep the conversation going.
Thank you, Sheila.
No promises, Phil.
So that motion has been made and accepted. Any other discussion? We've discussed this. So this is to recommend to full council that a 2-year term. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 You're in favor of the 2-year term
I'm in favor of moving it to the city council, so this will get it there for discussion.
for the motion?
For the motion.
Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
To
All
move,
right.
what are you vote? Are you voting on just moving it to the floor?
No, we're voting on changing it to 2 years.
Yeah, that's the, so this would be, the motion was made that it changed to 2 years. Our recommendation from this body. So that's right.
Yeah, now I see what you were saying, Dan. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could tell that Councilor Jarvis didn't understand it. It wasn't to send it.
Very, very good. Yes.
We're sending it regardless because it was brought up by a counselor, but this is our recommendation on bringing that forward because we don't have to bring anything else forward on
Good.
2.
Thanks for the clarification. I will change mine to a no.
I knew it because Dan, you're saying recommendation for 2 years. So
Yes.
Councilor
Very
Gilmore
good.
is a yes. Councilor Elmer is a yes. Councilor Jarvis and President Ricketts is a no. And
I'm a no.
okay,
So it's a split.
3 to 4 a.m.
It
Yeah, I'm
fails.
probably going to go to the full council, but I think it warrants a discussion. I think it's good food for thought.
right. No, that wasn't what this is about. This is what our recommendation was. It is going to the floor. Everything we're talking about tonight's going to the floor. We're just trying to decide. We're trying to give the recommendation to the floor.
Okay. So eligibility, we know we don't really have to give a recommendation because that's going to be based on 1-7.
Right. Correct.
Section 2-2, if we just want to do a couple of these and try to keep this meeting, not 2-2 was council president. Councilor Forgy.
You should add vice president.
Councilor Gwynn, this would be page 9. The first language recommendation would be to add, so the title of section 2.2 would change council president and vice president. That would be the language change.
Okay. And what was the reasoning for that?
There isn't anything that is written here, but I believe it just makes it a more complete section 2.2 because it talks about the election of the president and the duties, and then it talks in section C about the council vice president and duties.
So this
So
is
I
housekeeping at its
just-
best.
Yeah.
Correct.
Is there any discussion? David?
Yeah, I think this came up because you had some confusion at your meeting in January of this year. Right? Is this the section?
Right. Yes.
No, it was a school committee last year.
No. You had.
No, it was.
The question was how long.
No, that's
President-
what school committee. Yeah, that was different. That's a different section.
Hold on
You're
one
right.
second. Go ahead, David.
It was whether or not a president is elected for 1 term or 2. And it seems like the intention was every year you'll hold new elections. And so we
Correct.
made it clearer. And then we added language to help with the vice president since that was missing. And so when you look at the title, it says council president and vice president so that you know that that section is going to talk about the council president and vice president. And then the language in it pertains to the council president and vice president. And then we switched, we made the language, we suggested language be made clear. This is an absolute housekeeping provision.
Right.
Unless you all think that presidents were supposed to last for more, and vice presidents were to last for more than 1 year, which I don't think anybody thought.
Yeah.
This is totally housekeeping.
Right.
Is there anybody that has any objection to adding and vice president to 2-2?
No.
Okay, I think we will forward that. All right.
Can I add something, Dan, before we move on? Because
Oh,
we
yeah, yeah.
we also elect a treasurer, and our esteemed treasurer is on this call, so I would hate to ignore her.
Yeah, does that come up somewhere else? How'd that come up, Sheila, when you were on committee?
Actually, I'm not sure that we talked. This was one of the ones that we talked about very early on, and then quickly moved on to more robust issues.
Okay, I understand. David?
Past President Singer, yeah.
I appreciate what Sheila's saying, but the treasurer isn't in line to run the council.
Right.
So these are the officers that can lead the council, and so that's why
Okay.
they're elected. That's why this
Oh.
is it.
Right.
The treasurer doesn't have, as far as the charter goes, the treasurer can't lead, is not a person who will ever lead the council. So this is because since the vice president can be a leader of the council, you have to have something in there to show how the vice president and president are elected, and what happens if the president can't act, the vice president acts, blah blah blah. But the treasurer has nothing to do with this because of that reason.
All right.
The treasurer isn't important, but it's not part of this. It's not part of this focus.
Now, moving down, did someone?
Councilor Wood, the
Yeah.
treasurer is referenced in ordinance as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
My bad.
No, all good. All right. We see now on section 2-2 election and term, as soon as this is the thing after the councilors elect have been qualified following each city election, and then that's what Councilor Forgy talked about. It came to the attention of the committee that this section may be confusing with respect to the first part of the sentence before the word or. Since elections are biennial and the charter states after each election, it can be interpreted that the president is elected every 2 years rather than every year, which has been the custom. Moreover, the language after the word or seems to state that the president is elected each year to serve 1 year. To remedy the confusion, it is suggested that the phrase being as soon as, what's that word?
Practicable.
That's a weird word. And through the word or be deleted and the sentence begin with on the first day of the new year. Business day of the new year.
So you could change the word to practical.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just
That's
It's
more practical.
Possible is the possible, as soon as possible.
Possible.
yeah. Does anyone have a problem now? I mean, it's
Getting rid of it, you're getting rid of the word, so.
Deleting the word anyway, so it doesn't matter.
You don't have to debate it, just to add a simpler beginning. On the first day of the new year,
Right.
the first day of the new year. First business day of the new year.
or on the first business day, depending. It's the new year, yeah.
Any discussion on this piece?
No. Housekeeping.
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 Well, yeah, we just gotta, this is what, we don't want to rush these things, right, David? All right, next would be, Councilor Forgy, where are we going with this? The member of the city council shall also elect from among its members a vice president.
Yeah, and vice president, council president and vice president.
Okay. That's housekeeping too. Any discussion?
Nope, it's fine.
All right, the next one is suggested to delete the sentence before and begin the sentence, the vice president shall serve as acting president. Where is that?
I want to bring something up here. I can save it for the council. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, there is no change that I'm aware of to item B, which is powers and duties.
Right.
Okay. And then on C,
Yes.
okay.
And did you have something, Councilor Gilmore?
I did want to add that And this is one of those like, it's probably not going to happen. But you know, if the mayor wins Powerball and moves to Tahiti, and then the council president becomes the mayor and permanently vacates that position, I think that that should warrant a new election of council leadership, just to get that fresh, clean start. The way it's written now, the vice president would become the president. But I think that that's a good opportunity for the council to reassess, you know, if they have faith in their vice president and you know, want them to be president, that's great. But what if for some reason they don't? So I think it would be good to hit the reset button there. Anytime there's going to be an organizational change.
Thoughts? Okay, David?
I think if you read this, you know, I'm sorry. I wish that if I knew this was going to be discussed, I would have gone back and reviewed it. The point is that if a president leaves in the middle of the month, the vice president becomes the acting president. And then if you look at the last suggestion, you'll see that if the council president or vice president shall vacate, then you'll conduct a meeting and re-elect officers at the next meeting. So the vice president doesn't become president. The vice president becomes president while we wait for the next meeting, which is how that I don't see any other way that you could do that. But there's nothing in here that says the vice president becomes the president. And we talked about that at the committee level, and we decided that maybe Sheila's reminding herself that it would be better if the council just held another election and re-voted for that position.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to advocate for that because it's one of those weird things that could happen in the moon and stars align, right?
Right, but it would just be a vote. Yeah.
We've already taken care of it, and it's in there.
It's already in there.
It's already in there. We've already thought about it.
Okay.
Council Fortune?
Yeah.
Yeah, section D seems very reasonable, and it's what Sheila was asking for.
Yes.
Correct.
Did we lose Dan?
Right.
Oh, he's there.
I'm back. I was here, but you couldn't hear me. All right. Section D is already there. So that takes care of that was Sheila's concern in C. So we're adding D. D would be the new, that's all new language.
It's new language, and this is a great red line page. Take all the things on the bottom, red line it on the top. It'll make more sense. And then that's how you should present it, in my opinion, to the city council, if you're going to vote on it. Because these are all red line suggestions, plus adding the new, you know what I mean? They're not substantive suggestions, they're red line suggestions.
Right.
Right.
I mean, they're substantive in their underlying words, but you all agree that the substance is what you want. So it's just.
Right.
So as Sheila was saying.
I'm sorry if you misinterpreted me. I was not trying to contradict what was up there. I was trying to provide some context because I was sort of thinking this one through early on and I was trying to imagine different scenarios. So I just wanted to advocate for that one.
But see, section D, Sheila, that should take care of what you brought up.
It does. Let me rephrase. So to rephrase, I fully endorse adding section D.
Okay, I will agree. So yeah,
Right.
section D talks about vacancies. So is it our recommendation to have a strike-through version of section 2-2 with the recommendations by the committee with the addition of section D?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? We'll send that recommendation. All right. I just want to do a couple of these. Section 2-3, there's nothing here, so I'm guessing there's no changes, Councilor Forgy?
Correct.
Okay.
It just references compensation, and everybody felt that there were different reasons to increase, but it might not be a great idea right now.
All right. Now, under compensation, I see an asterisk under salary.
Right.
It says each city councilor may receive an annual salary as established by the vote of the city council. The asterisk said members of the public suggested that the annual salary be increased due to time and effort required of councilors and to make the pool of candidates larger by allowing persons who otherwise cannot afford to run the opportunity for a paycheck. But that's not a recommendation. That was just a member suggestion.
Right.
Correct.
It's not a charter
Do we
change.
wanna,
Not a change, right?
It's a,
Not a
uh,
change.
yeah, that'd be an ordinance change.
that's it. Yeah, that's ordinance, not charter, correct?
So it's not a
So,
charter change.
so there's nothing changing in 2-4. No recommendations. 2 dash, someone have a question?
Correct.
Okay. 2-5 general powers. I don't see anything here. 2-6, which is quorum rules. I don't see any changes here. Is that correct?
Correct.
Which one?
And then
2-6 does have changes.
yep.
It does have fixes, but
Where's
A and-
two-
A and B stay in place.
and it comes A and B stay in place. Where's the change on this one?
C.
Next page. C.
Okay. All right there. It's C section 2. Special meetings of the city council shall be held at the call of the council president or on the call of any 5 or more members by written notice delivered in hand or to the place of residence of each member. The councilors on the committee brought up the need for providing notices by electronic communications as an additional option. Such an option, in order to ensure a fair and equitable system of providing notice, should require a communication vehicle that is available to all councilors, can confirm receipt of such notice to the city clerk. This committee suggests the following language be added. Is this the same thing? Or by secure electronic communication that allows receipt confirmation. Anyone have
Right.
any discussion on that?
I
Yeah.
suggest we move it forward.
I agree. I think it's very cumbersome for the clerk's office to have to send these notices out to us door to door in person.
Right.
And I'm never home during the day anyways, so they're better off emailing me.
Can I be the devil's advocate here? Just David, it says or. Is it and or? You know what I mean? Do they have to do them, or does everyone get them electronically? How does that?
By charter right now, they have to do it. So that's why we're changing it, right?
Right, but we worded the word is or. You know, so
The R word is in there on purpose. Not everyone can get electronic communication. Okay, so let's start from the policy. The policy is that every member must get notice.
right.
In the old days, the only way that you could certify, the clerk could certify that everybody got notice was to hand deliver it or whatever, you know, so that was the only way the clerk could say, as a matter of law, everyone on the committee got notice. Now there's another option, which is electronic communication. So if we add that to the charter, then you by ordinance or however, or by your rules can decide that if the member can prove to the clerk that you have the ability to get electronic communication that can be confirmed by the clerk, then the clerk will be happy to send you electronic notice.
Correct.
If you cannot prove that to the clerk, then the clerk has to give you hand notice.
Right.
But at least it gives the counselors another option. It's just to add the options, it's not a constraint, it's an expansion of options.
Perfect. David, and I'm glad you brought up one point. We have to remember that ordinance is what can be changed by vote. This sets it up that we can allow an ordinance, which if it's not in here as an or, we couldn't do it. So that's a great point. Does anyone have a
So are you
problem?
saying-
We,
Dan, are you
we-
saying that Go ahead.
Councilor Gilmore?
Okay, are you saying that if we make this change, then we would have to draft an ordinance to allow for the electronic communications, like as a second step?
Oops,
sorry.
I think we would have to make sure there was an ordinance in place that shows the draft of how it's done. You know, how the electronic notification is done. Do we allow it to be emailed with receipt forwarded? There's got to be a procedure on the OR.
Yeah, I understand that. I was just wondering if we need to have an ordinance ready so that if this gets passed, we don't have this black hole of, you know.
I think if it's accepted by the legislature, we can then just move forward with it at the next, meeting with a quick ordinance to say, once again, it's housekeeping to go apply it with the new charter. But yes.
So we
Thank
did
you.
have a counselor a couple of years ago that did not get email. They would come into the clerk's office to get everything.
Right.
They could not get email. So it does happen.
And the OR is going to allow us to continue to do it that way or come up with electronic rules, which we don't have at the moment.
Right.
So any objection to sending this forward with the OR intact?
No.
Okay. Where are we now? That was two. That's page 10. Are we on to page 11? Right.
You should be on page 12, I think.
11 is a 2-7 access to information. Is that where we are?
Yes. There's no changes.
There's no change. Where's 2-6? Am I missing it? 2-4.
Page 9 and 10 is 2-6. You may have a different version, but it's
Oh
broken.
yeah,
up.
the 2-5 is general powers, no changes. 2-6, okay. 2-6, no changes. Then we're done with that. Okay, 2-7, access to information. Is that where we are?
Yes.
Correct.
No change.
And there's no
No change.
changes, correct?
Correct.
And then 2-8, the city auditor.
It's just the language.
And that was,
It was just that the word elect, be changed to vote to appoint or may appoint or appoint.
No, the other
It
way.
was
The other way around. We would change appoint to elect.
may elect, whatever. Whatever it is.
Whatever it is, I'm against it. Yeah,
it was suggested that the word elect or phrase vote to appoint be used rather than appoint.
right,
So do we have a preference of either elect or vote to appoint? I think vote to appoint's more.
For an auditor? Yes.
Any recommendation on that?
I wouldn't spend more than 10 seconds on this one.
All right, but I'm just saying, I just want to bring it forward with a word and not have it as an and or on the floor. Do we want to say elect?
I move that we recommend to say vote to appoint.
Appoint.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, that's a positive unanimous recommendation. Okay. Where are we now? 2-8, city clerk. We're getting there.
Counselor Gwynn.
Yeah.
If I could, first of all, I don't know how much longer I can stay on. So if I am dropped off, I apologize. This is something that I think really needs some discussion.
Okay. So it's almost 8 o'clock. What's your poison here? Do we want to try to? What's the rationale on 2.8?
You mind, Chris, if I give it?
No, go right ahead, David.
Okay.
Actually, the asterisk should be on B, not D. So
Correct.
there's a bigger question that I think Councilor Forgy will address at the next meeting, but for purposes of making this charter work for us as the city, make it work for the city council. It's not clear who the boss is of the clerk. The charter definitely says that the clerk is, appointed by the city council. On the other hand, it's the mayor who negotiates salary and et cetera, et cetera. Chris has some ideas about maybe we should elect a clerk, and those are deeper policy discussions. But in the meantime, you, the city council, need to have in the charter something that says that the clerk is there for you to do the things that you need to do, and that's not clear. So if the mayor were to pull the clerk out of the office on a Tuesday and say, I need you today, and President Ricketts went into the clerk's office and said, no, 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 I have an emergency, I need you today, that there's nothing in the charter that would solve that problem. So the way that we did it was just to solve that problem is to add this language, and Tammy has become that person, but now it's in the charter that there's always a person in that office that's absolutely assigned to the city council. So when the president goes into that office and says, I need this, I need that, I need this, I need that, there is always a person there. Even if the mayor takes the clerk at that day, there's at least a designated person in that office. And I think you should do this absolutely right away. So that there's never, because that fight hasn't happened, but it's going to happen, and then you're going to rue it. So this way you can put that, recommend this language or other language that you might think is better, but I think this was thought out. So, and it's working because Tammy actually does that. So it's actually, it's functioning in the clerk's office the way this is written. And I think you want to codify it so you're never stuck without a clerk being 100% connected to the city council.
Right.
Councilor Forgy, I see 3 asterisks here on 2.8. Are they all the same piece of this?
No, it's really, that's my bad. That's not her bad. I didn't delete the 2 asterisks. The asterisk should go under B, because that's where the powers and duties are there.
So there shouldn't be an asterisk under C or D?
Correct.
And-
No, I'm sorry. It should be under C. My bad.
Right.
Correct.
Not B or D, just C.
C, because it talks about the perform such other duties as may be provided by ordinance, by other vote of the city council. And then next, then it makes sense. The city clerk shall appoint a qualified person to make sure that that person is at all times available to the city council. So it should be C. I apologize for that.
Councilor Forgy, any discussion on this?
I believe that this really needs to have a time. It needs to be it might be a good stopping place, I'm going to say, for the meeting that's going to take place next Wednesday. This really needs to be hammered out, I think. I'm going to take your recommendation because you've been leading the charge here. My recommendation is that we forward the information that we've put forward through section 2-7 of the charter recommendations from this committee at next Wednesday's meeting. And we will pick up at our next A&O meeting with section 2-8.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, any abstentions? All right, so that's going to end tonight's discussion on the charter pieces, but we're not going to adjourn yet. Counselor, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to suggest that moving forward with this, that we have cheers start to discuss what we're going to be discussing here next, so that people that, as Dave suggested, maybe that's 5 more people discussing what's going to be brought up next. I think we need to do that also. So, you know what I'm saying? So it isn't a week's notice in between our discussion and the council meeting.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we will take a look. It's going to have to take some dissecting, Counselor Jarvis, and we'll look and say, and I'll get with Counselor Forgy. There's going to be I'm out of the country until September 6th. I leave the day after our council meeting, and I'm gone until September 6th. So it's going to be a little tough because I won't be at the next chairs meeting, but I might be able to be there via Wi-Fi, but I'm not sure because I'll be far out of the country. What I would recommend is that because David Singer made that recommendation to, I will try in the future to say that we are going to take on section 2-8 through section 3-10 based on what amount of time we have to do. The reason I didn't do it this meeting was 7 and 7 and 7-8 could have been huge. When we put that on the agenda for tonight, we had no idea what the lawyer was going to say as the recommendation of the questions. She could have said the question has to be in the entirety. We would have had 2 huge questions to put on the ballot, and it came back like yesterday that we didn't have to. So it made our time allotment shorter. Councilor Forgy also submitted some stuff that we're going to be talking about,
Right.
and it's good you all have it already, which is section 614 and 611, which 611 and 614 could take up a whole meeting.
Yeah. So,
you know,
Councilor Gwynn.
yes.
All right, since you are going out of the country, I'm just wondering, with all due respect, if you don't mind, could Councilor Forgy submit what she would like to be on chairs?
Of
in your
course.
absence?
I'll work with her before I go,
Okay.
and we'll come up with
Right. So
some pieces.
instead of always hitting up against that 5-day rule, like I say to people, like, send it as early as you can. If you want to send little pieces of it, just send wherever you think to Tammy now. She'll compile it and then she'll put it together for chairs. So
Right. If you noticed in our meeting tonight, the entire charter article is there. It's so we can discuss anything we want at any meeting.
right.
But we will talk about our priorities, our
Yeah.
intention of that meeting.
Right. Perfect.
And tonight, I thought if we could end these meetings, around 8 or 9 o'clock on a regular basis when we have this meeting,
Right.
it would still be good. But tonight we got more done than just doing the 2 charter pieces that I thought we were going to do. So we're actually ahead of the loop at the moment.
Right.
Okay.
Great
Let me
job.
look at this. Any new business? Any old business? Our next meeting is September 8th. 2021 at 5:30 versus via WebEx. Any other thoughts? Seeing none, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Made by Ricketts, seconded by Elmer and everybody else. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night. Thank you, everybody. Good work.
Night.
Councilor Forgy, David Singer, thank you very much for helping us. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.